What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. And in this video, I'll be taking you guys to the ELITE64 team selection for the upcoming Game Week 14. So the game weeks have happened thick and fast, a lot of fixture congestion has happened over the prior game weeks, and that's why I gave the ELITE64 team selection a little bit of a break, but now we do have a midweek break, decided to bring this series back. Now if you guys are new to this series or new to this channel as a whole, what I basically do is I look at the ELITE64, which is going to be FPL General's Invitational League. Basically 64 of the best managers in the world, take a look at their template, where they are in the rankings, and then predict their team selection going to the upcoming game week. So I find this series super informative. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys do as well, and I will continue to make these videos. With that being said, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. Now the first talking point I want to go over, and the reason I actually created this video for Game Week 14 is that I do expect most of these managers to actually have used the first wildcard. Now in terms of the prior game weeks, we looked at the wildcard stats. In terms of Game Week 8, 9 and 10, just under 80% of the ELITE64 actually used the wildcard chip in those three respective game weeks. And now the new stat for Game Week 13 is that 7.8% of the ELITE64 also used the wildcard chip in that game week. So that obviously leaves us with 12.5%. However, I do think there's kind of two scenarios here. The first scenario, the more likely one, is that these managers use the wildcard within the first couple of game weeks, and therefore we can classify that as an early wildcard. Now yes, there might actually be one or two managers that haven't used the wildcard chip at all, and therefore I do expect them to use it either in Game Week 14, 15, or maybe even Game Week 16. But the reason I want to show you this is that in terms of the template for the ELITE64, the one I'll show you in the next talking point is going to be pretty reliable, as this should be the team for the next 3 game weeks. But if you guys are still also holding on to a wildcard, comment down below when you guys are going to use it. Are you going to use it in the kind of Game Week 14, the upcoming game week, or will you use it in Game Week 16 as a kind of free it? But now going on to the actual template of the ELITE64 as of Game Week 13. Obviously the conclusion of Game Week 13 allowed us to see what the template was going to be. And then at the end of this video, I'll be kind of predicting the transfer plan and the team selection going into Game Week 14. So how we're going to be running through this is that no, this won't be the kind of starting 15 of the ELITE64. This will be from left to right in terms of most popular to 5th most popular in terms of defenders and midfielders. Then with the goalkeepers, the top 2 goalkeepers in terms of ownership, and the top 3 forwards in terms of ownership as well. So let's start off with our 2 goalkeepers, or the most highly owned goalkeepers in the template, and we've actually had to switch up here. It's going to be Danny Ward at number 1 and Nick Pope at number 2. So in terms of the previous videos, Nick Pope has been the highest owned goalkeeper, but now Danny Ward is going to be there after a few pretty good game weeks. So 59.4% compared to Nick Pope's 57.8%. Both goalkeepers though I think will make up most people's teams in the ELITE64. As with Danny Ward being so cheap, you can also afford Nick Pope. Now hopefully these managers did actually start Danny Ward over Nick Pope like myself. Game Week 13, definitely not a great game week for Newcastle defense, whereas Leicester are actually picking up some form. But now going to the defensive department, and we do have a 100% owned defender. We didn't have one last week, but currently we do have one. It's going to be Kieran Trippier at 100%. So Newcastle defender has racked up a few assists, a few bonus points, and most recently a couple clean sheets as well. That's going to make him quite a desirable defender to have. So definitely one that I would look for coverage from if you guys don't own Kieran Trippier. Is on great form at the current moment, and with some nice figures coming up for Newcastle, could be an absolute gem. Next up is going to be Cancelo, a kind of predictable option. We've seen the downgrade of our defensive departments. No Trents, no Reece Jameses anymore, and therefore Cancelo is the last remaining premium defender. Now his ownership is just under 94%, but that's kind of expected. Although he didn't keep a clean sheet in Game Week 13, with Man City's fixtures coming up looking quite strong, as long as he does start, I think he's going to be a great asset. Then you guys can see the downgrade of our defensive departments. The third highest owned defender to go for is going to be Gay at just under 61%. So in terms of the Crystal Palace defensive coverage, 61% is pretty high, but you guys can see that there is kind of a variation here in terms of that defensive department, where we now are going for some cheaper assets. So if you guys don't have some Crystal Palace coverage and they do have a great fixture, I'd look to cover them either with Aguita, Anderson, or like we have on screen here, Gay. Next up is going to be Dunk, also cheap kind of defender to go for. Brighton have a really solid defense, but unfortunately they don't have the best fixtures coming up. So just under 22% for Lewis Dunk from Brighton, so kind of a rotation piece there, maybe the 4th or 5th defender that the ELITE64 do own. But you guys will see in terms of the rest of the defenders, most of them are around 20%. Same could be said about Doherty, coming in at just below 22%, a massive surprise for me. Just a couple of game weeks ago, Doherty wasn't even starting, and currently is owned by about a 5th of the ELITE64. But you guys can see in terms of Lewis Dunk, Doherty under 22%, I think all these options will kind of rotate, so the chances of them having Gay, Cancelo and Trippier are pretty high, and the 4th and 5th defender are up to interpretation. So definitely in terms of the template, the first 3 are going to be in the team selection, but it is nice to see some variation in terms of the 4th and 5th defenders. Going into our midfield department, and there is one player with a massive boost of ownership. It's going to be Mo Salah with just under 94%. A couple of game weeks ago, the last time we created this ELITE64, De Bruyne was owned by more people than Salah, but I do think that Game Week 12 blank for those Man City assets increased the ownership of Mo Salah. Now it's going to be interesting to see what the ELITE64 do with Mo Salah because of his lack of form, kind of blanking in Game Week 13. Nice fixtures on Game Week 14 and onwards though. And with the ELITE64 being quite conservative, I expect this ownership to stay constant. But you guys can let me know what you guys are doing with Mo Salah in the comments down below. Are you selling or are you keeping? Because chances are you probably also do own him. Then you have Martinelli, kind of a no-brainer there, 91%. A little bit strange for me that he's not kind of the highest owned midfielder at the current moment. Although he has dipped off in form over the prior game weeks, still do back him, and because we bought him at so cheap, don't expect him to sell him anytime soon. We then have Phil Foden with a massive 89.1% of ownership, absolutely massive ownership there. A couple of game weeks ago was around 20%, so like Mo Salah, his ownership is boosted up, and I do think the transfer out of KDB allowed that. So though he did blank in Game Week 13, at least he didn't actually start and blank, he was benched, so hopefully that benching is out the way and he can return in the future game weeks. We then have Wilfried Zaha, a player that I own, might be on the transfer out list. Although he did score in Game Week 12, Game Week 13 was pretty disappointing, but in Game Week 14 he does have a home fixture where he seems to do the best. So 64.1% for Wilfried Zaha, but I do expect that to maybe downgrade as these managers look to shift into Saka. And that's going to be our next option to talk about, 23.4%, so I do expect Saka's ownership to increase. Lovely fixture in Game Week 14, Nottingham Forest at home, then Wolves away in Game Week 16, and Arsenal playing a great brand of football and the stats look pretty strong. But definitely like our defensive department, a template is definitely formed with those first four. Saka could be a rotation piece instead of maybe a Zaha, and the rest will be kind of cheap bench fillers like an Andreas Pereira. Then go on to our forward department, the return of the 100% owned options. No surprises here, Erling Haaland, massive performance in Game Week 13. Hopefully you guys did captain him, but I'll talk about that shortly in the captaincy debate. So nothing much more has to be said about Erling Haaland. Definitely has been returning, and that's why he is owned by every manager in the ELITE64. We then have Mitrovic at just under 86%, a very kind of solid cheap option, has been returning over these prior game weeks, just as long as he does stay injury free, which might be a concern. And the final option to go for is going to be Ivan Toney at 37.5%. Solanke actually did rival him in terms of ownership, but Toney came out tops with a better ownership. So although Brentford are kind of dipped in form over these prior game weeks, hopefully Toney can rebound and do some damage from now to that World Cup. But looking at the ownerships as a whole, you guys can definitely see a template has been formed. I'll outline that a little bit better in the team selection coming up towards the end of the video. But what I want you guys to do is comment down below how many of these assets do you guys own. Currently I am on quite a few of them. I think most of my starting 11 is pretty template, but then I do have one or two bench options that are a little bit differential. But comment down below how many you guys do own. Now quickly before we go on to the Game Week 14 team selection, all that good stuff, I want to touch on captaincy because obviously Game Week 13, massive captaincy swing between Haaland and Mo Salah. So in terms of Haaland, he was captained by 89.1%, and Mo Salah was captained by a respective 10.9%. So as you guys can see, only these two options were captained in the ELITE64, and I'm pretty sure the left hand side or the blue side, Erling Haaland captainers were much happier. Now yet again, we kind of bring up this debate about the perma captain for Erling Haaland. Should you guys go for it? Should you guys not? I do actually think the logic was there for Game Week 13. So if you guys did captain Mo Salah, I wouldn't beat myself up too much, as about 11% of the ELITE64 did as well. Now I think this game week just kind of emphasized the fact that we have to choose our battles on the captaincy, but it is a little bit disheartening when Mo Salah faced Nottingham Forest, kind of the worst team in the Prem at the moment, at centre forward. He didn't even have the goods to outperform Erling Haaland. So I do hope in the future game weeks there's one or two opportunities to actually go for a differential captain, as that looks like the best way to rise the ranks. But while we're on captaincy debate, comment down below who you guys are captaining. I know that Erling Haaland has the early kickoff against Leicester, so are you backing the early kickoff or are you going for someone differential like a Mo Salah? Now finally, in terms of the rank updates, I wanted to showcase where these managers are sitting in the current rankings. I know I said kind of 64 of the best managers in the world, so I want to give you guys some perspective of where they are in the rankings currently. So in terms of the top 10k, just under 5%, so 4.7% of the ELITE64 within the top 10k ranks, which is super small. That number grows slightly to 20.3% in terms of the top 100k, and then finally we get 70.3% within the top 1 million. So yes, even the ELITE64, not everyone is in the top 1 million, so if you guys are out of it, you guys can still get a good ranking. I expect most of these managers to actually kick on from now to the end of the season, get a good ranking overall, so please don't get disheartened by your rank currently. But I will update this as the season goes on. Hopefully most of these managers are within the top 100k come Game Week 38. Now the final talking point to go over is kind of my prediction for the upcoming Game Week 14. In terms of this transfer plan, I'm going to bank the transfer for the ELITE64. The respective starting 11 looks pretty strong. There might be one or two changes that I will discuss later on, but let's go over the actual team. So in terms of the budget, bottom right hand side, I could afford this draft with 1 million left in the bank. So if you guys have a less team value than me, you can still afford this team. And if you guys have more money, you can always do an upgrade. So starting off on our bench, I've brought in the cheap filler options here. I've gone for Danny Ward, Andreas Pereira, and Nico Williams. Super cheap options, returning the points currently, and that's why I think that you have to go for them. The only kind of differential is going to be Doherty on our bench. As you guys would have seen, our kind of 4th or 5th defender. I've gone for Doherty with a better fixture, but Lewis Dunk could also be here. In terms of the starting goalkeeper, I've given Nick Pope the nod. Aston Villa at home, great fixture on paper. Without Stevie G beating Brighton 4-0, that's a little bit worrying for me, but I do trust that Newcastle defence. That trust is going to continue into our defensive department. We've got Trippier as well, so double up against Aston Villa, but it's a home game which I am fairly confident on. Then obviously we have Cancelo and Gay, the second and third highest owned defenders, and honestly this is kind of my defence as well. Then heading on to midfield department, we have Salah, Foden, Martinelli, and then Wilfried Zaha, and this is my exact midfield as well. Now I do think Saka for Zaha could be an alternative that the ELITE64 do, and therefore that's probably the first transfer that I might consider. Then finally go on to our forward department, really put the captaincy on Erling Haaland, kind of trust him to get the goods, and therefore he'll be the most highly captained option going into Game Week 14. Then Mitrovic against Everton, hopefully he does stay injury free, and then Tony against Wolves, which is a great fixture. But like I mentioned, in terms of transfers, Saka in for Zaha could be an alternative, also maybe bringing in an Arsenal defender such as a Gabriel could be a popular asset. Otherwise I think banking the transfer looks pretty good for Game Week 14. But going over the starting 11, the defensive department, just kind of Anderson for Gaze, my exact defense. The midfield department is exactly the same, and currently I do own Solanke over Ivan Toney. So yet again, comment down below how many of the starting 11 you guys do own. I really do think this will be the template going to Game Week 14, not only for the ELITE64, but probably kind of FPL Twitter as a whole, as these options look pretty template. But this is basically up with the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you didn't subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for the team selection coming up tomorrow, as well as the ultimate guide, so comment down below if you guys do have any queries or questions. But I'm going to sign off with Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.